Right now, at the bottom of the world, something is happening that no weather report will ever warn you about. A glacier the size of Florida, one that holds enough frozen water to raise every coastline on Earth by several feet, is quietly, steadily falling apart. And the most brilliant engineers on the planet have come up with a plan so bold, so enormous, so almost impossible to comprehend, that it sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. They want to build a wall, underwater, in Antarctica. But that's just the beginning of the story, because Antarctica is hiding far more than a melting glacier. It's hiding ancient forests, alien life, stolen ice, and landscapes that shouldn't exist. This is the continent that keeps rewriting everything we thought we knew. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, warm ocean water is doing something it was never supposed to do. It's finding a way in. The Thwaites Glacier sits in West Antarctica like a cork in a bottle. As long as it stays intact, the glaciers behind it stay locked in place, but that warm water creeping underneath it has been quietly eroding the ice from below, carving out hollow chambers, weakening the base, tipping the balance. Scientists have been watching this for years, and what they've observed has quietly alarmed every researcher who has studied it. So how do you stop a glacier from collapsing? A team of scientists and engineers proposed something extraordinary. Build a massive curtain, essentially an underwater berm, on the seafloor directly beneath where the warm water enters. The structure would redirect or block that warm current before it ever reaches the glacier's underbelly. We're talking about an engineering feat that would stretch for miles across the ocean floor in one of the most remote and hostile environments on the planet. The cost, potentially tens of billions of dollars. The timeline, decades of construction in near-freezing waters under crushing pressure. The alternative, watching one of Earth's most critical glaciers slide into the sea. And accepting what comes after, it is, without question, the most ambitious climate intervention ever seriously proposed. Now, while Thwaites gets most of the attention, it turns out Antarctica has a thief in its midst, and it's been operating in plain sight for decades. Meet the Polar East Glacier. What researchers discovered when they trained satellite sensors on Antarctica's ice flow patterns was something that genuinely surprised them. This glacier has been aggressively pulling mass from the ice streams around it, essentially redirecting the frozen landscape in its favor. Think of it as a river that's been slowly rerouting itself by carving into its neighbor's banks. Only, instead of water, it's billions of tons of ice. The rate at which Polar East has been expanding its reach has accelerated sharply over recent decades. And unlike the dramatic, visible calving events that make headlines when icebergs break off into the ocean, this process is subtle, invisible, almost. A slow-motion heist playing out across a canvas so vast, you'd need a satellite just to see it. Scientists have nicknamed it the Ice Pirate, and the more they study it, the clearer it becomes. Ice sheets don't behave like static, frozen slabs. They're dynamic. They flow. They compete. They steal. Antarctica has a way of sparking the imagination. And when satellite imagery went public and people began zooming into the continent on their screens, the theories started flying. There was the so-called doorway, a perfectly rectangular gap in a rock face that sent certain corners of the internet into a frenzy. Ancient civilizations, hidden bases, a portal to somewhere else entirely? The answer is geology. Antarctica's extreme freeze-thaw cycles, wind erosion, and the natural fracturing patterns of certain rock types produce remarkably angular formations. Right angles in nature are less rare than we assume, especially in environments where ice expansion splits rock along clean fault lines. Then there was the ice ship, a half-mile-long formation rising from the surface that, from the right angle, looks almost exactly like the prow of a massive vessel. Again, geology. Tabular icebergs and surface ice formations carve themselves into geometric shapes through the same wind and freeze mechanics. And the pyramids, perhaps the most viral of all Antarctic mysteries. Three-sided peaks rising sharply from the ice near the Ellsworth Mountains. These are a well-documented geological feature called a pyramidal peak or horn, formed when glaciers erode a mountain from multiple sides simultaneously over millions of years. The Alps are full of them. So is the Himalayas. Antarctica just happens to have ones that look almost too perfect. The truth about Antarctica is always stranger and more interesting than the myth. Here's what almost no one talks about when they talk about Antarctica. The continent is hollow. Not literally, but beneath those kilometers of ice, there are canyons, valleys, mountain ranges, and river systems that rival anything on the surface of the Earth. And we're only now beginning to map them. One of the most extraordinary features discovered in recent years is a canyon system carved into the bedrock beneath the ice that rivals the Grand Canyon in scale. It was hidden for millions of years under a layer of ice thick enough to bury a skyscraper 5 times over. To explore these subglacial environments, scientists have begun deploying submarine robots, autonomous underwater vehicles small enough to fit through a narrow borehole, drilled through the ice, yet sophisticated enough to map the terrain, measure water temperature, and collect samples in the total darkness, hundreds of meters below. What they're finding is a world that operates entirely on its own terms. Rivers of meltwater, ancient sediment layers. And in the most isolated corners of these hidden lakes, life. Lake Enigma, one of dozens of liquid water lakes discovered beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, has become a focal point for astrobiologists. The microbial organisms living there have never been exposed to sunlight, never been exposed to surface air. They've been sealed in their frozen world for potentially millions of years. And they're thriving. If life can find a way in a place like that, in the cold, in the dark, under crushing ice, the implications reach far beyond Antarctica. This next discovery might be the hardest one to wrap your mind around. Roughly 90 million years ago, the land that is now Antarctica, the coldest, most desolate continent on Earth, was covered in a lush, dense, swampy rainforest. We know this because of amber, fossilized tree resin, the same golden substance that can preserve insects and plant matter for millions of years, was found in Antarctic sediment cores. Inside it, the microscopic remains of ancient tropical plants, spores, pollen, the chemical fingerprints of a warm, wet, thriving ecosystem. The forest grew at latitudes close to the South Pole, which means at the time, even during months of total polar darkness, the climate was warm enough to sustain dense vegetation. Temperatures near the pole during that era were likely in the range of what you'd find in a modern-day rainforest. The CO2 levels in the atmosphere were dramatically higher than today. What's remarkable isn't just what this tells us about Antarctica. It's what it tells us about how radically our planet's climate has transformed over geological timescales, and how capable Earth is of becoming something almost unrecognizable. Antarctica was once green, covered in trees, teeming with life. Now it holds the ice that keeps our oceans in check. Antarctica still has secrets it hasn't given up yet. And sometimes, all it takes to find them is looking from above. Emperor penguins are the largest penguin species on Earth, standing nearly 4 feet tall and weighing up to 90 pounds. You'd think colonies of hundreds of these animals would be hard to miss. You'd be wrong. In 2020, researchers analyzing high-resolution satellite imagery discovered multiple previously unknown emperor penguin colonies hidden along stretches of the Antarctic coastline. The colonies had gone undetected for years, simply because no one had physically traveled to those remote locations. And from the ground level, they blend into the surrounding ice. What gave them away from orbit was their guano. The brownish-red patches left by large gatherings of penguins stand out clearly against the white ice when seen from space. Each new colony discovered is significant. Emperor penguins breed exclusively on sea ice, and as Antarctic sea ice patterns continue to shift, understanding where these colonies exist and how stable their habitat is becomes critical for long-term conservation planning. Scientists now believe there may be additional undiscovered colonies still waiting to be found. Hidden, patient, living at the edge of the world, entirely unbothered by human existence. Antarctica is not just a frozen wasteland at the bottom of a map. It is an archive, a warning, a world unto itself. It holds the story of what this planet used to be. Forests where there is now only ice, liquid lakes buried under glaciers, life thriving in places that have never seen sunlight. And it holds a warning about what comes next. A glacier on the edge, an ocean ready to rise, and a civilization now seriously considering whether to build a wall at the bottom of the sea. The engineers who proposed that structure know it may never be built. The science is still being worked out. The cost is staggering. The logistics are almost incomprehensible. But the fact that we're seriously having that conversation, that's the part that stays with you. Antarctica is telling us something. And the question we need to answer isn't whether we can hear it. It's whether we'll listen in time.